And welcome to the program. Here's what's coming up on Network Africa. Ethnic violence in Sudan's Darfur region kills at least 12 people. A government delegation en route to Mekelle for the first official visit since the start of the war in Ethiopia. Plus, DRC forces describe M23 withdrawal from seized positions as a decoy. And here's where we begin on Network Africa. An aid group reporting that ethnic violence in Sudan's troubled western region of Darfur has killed at least 12 people over the past few days. Those clashes between herdsmen and farmers in the Belal area in South Darfur province have also injured at least 42 people. Local authorities say the clashes grew out of an attempt by herdsmen to loot a motorized rickshaw known as a tuk-tuk in the village of Amuri, killing one person. A fighting escalated when herdsmen and the local population traded attacks. Authorities then declared a state of emergency and imposed a nighttime curfew in Belal to help stop the clashes. A spokesperson for the General Coordination for Refugees and Displaced in Darfur, Adam Regal, says the aid group counted 12 dead in the fighting and the tally could be higher. He says many villages in the area were either burnt or looted. Now, hundreds of families have been displaced. They're taking shelter in Nyala, the provincial capital of South Darfur. Violence was the latest to rock Darfur in recent months. Back in November, at least 48 people were killed in tribal clashes in the central Darfur province. Families are picking up the pieces after a gas tank explosion claimed 15 lives in Boksburg in South Africa on Saturday. One family lost 4 children in the explosion. Jan Brits said the driver responsible for the explosion belongs in jail. A mother of the kids is not doing good, she says. She's in pain. His wife and him are not coping. He said when it happened, he was surprised and asked what the tanker was doing there. Another witness, William Ntaladi from the Ekurhuleni EMS, said security has been beefed up at the scene of the explosion. Police have, however, arrested the 32-year-old driver of that tanker in the gas explosion that happened on Saturday in South Africa. A suspect faces multiple counts of culpable homicide and negligence and is expected to appear in court on December 28th. A number of fatalities has risen to 15, as we have reported. 37 people, including 24 patients and 13 staff members, who were in the Tambo Memorial Hospital sustained severe burns. They have since been diverted to neighboring hospitals. We have our South Africa Bureau Chief, Betty Dibia, with more on this. Betty, Merry Christmas, and not so Merry Christmas it's been for these people who've been victims of this fire in South Africa. Tell us the extent of the damage that has happened, in the area and what the witnesses have been reporting about what happened.
Well, we were there a few hours after it happened. You said it all. Basically, the driver was coming from KwaZulu-Natal, Richards Bay, carrying LPG gas to Botswana. And he drove through, for some flyovers or for some bridges, you have the height limit. So he got stuck in there. And there was fire. The fire service came to try to pull it out. Probably the friction now sparked some, it caused that explosion. And many of those who were affected, 15 people confirmed dead. There could be more. Their homes, 2 homes, according to Gift of the Givers, were affected. But structural damage to those buildings are not as much as you have for the bridge, which was totally destroyed. Some people, many of those affected were bystanders, those seeing fire. I don't know why anybody would do that. Those seeing fire and going towards the fire. So that explosion, as you're seeing in the visuals, but now happened. And many people, there's a second clip that I sent along with that, where the clothes were blown off the bodies of the people. People were burnt, and then the hospital, the Tambo Memorial, is not far from that area as well. That's why you have the injured patients who were affected at that hospital. Some have been taking away structural damage at the hospital section. There's some extent of damage. The minister has gone there along with the premier of Gauteng province, Panyaza Lesufi, and other party leaders have all gone to see the extent of damage. But there's a lot that still that will have to be fixed, as well as that bridge. The area is more or less, Ekurhuleni is an industrial area. It's not too far from the OR Tambo International Airport, which is in Ekurhuleni, by the way. And then the lives. It's really unfortunate. The first person we spoke to there, I couldn't use his interview because he was talking about body that scene of the incident, really a bad picture, and there were people running around naked with high degree burns all over their bodies. So it's really a bad picture, and unfortunately on there's no day would have been good, but unfortunately on Christmas Eve, a really sad story.
I can't even begin to imagine, some of the pictures that you have seen and how conscious you are still to talk about them. Some of the video you said you sent, of course, must have been horrific, having to see people with not just the clothes on their backs burnt off, but also their skin as well. And we're talking
peeled
about...
off, yes.
Yeah, peeled off. And we're talking about LPG, so that's gas, right? How safe is the area? And then how safe is the hospital still standing?
Hospital is still standing. It's not a small hospital. It's not a very big hospital, but it's not a small hospital. There is an extent of structural damage. The officials went in. We were not really allowed to go in there with them, but the officials went in there, so we got to see some of the extent, like the roof. Just the intensity of that explosion is what sort of went on to that hospital, which is not far from the area of the incident. So hospital is still standing. A lot will still need to be fixed at the hospital. And those are, 37 people injured, 24 of them are patients, and then staff members about 13, as you had said earlier. So a part of the hospital was affected. You had the charity organization Gift of the Givers, supplying ambulance, fire trucks were burned in that explosion as well, and some other vehicles. So the charity organizations trying to help or to support all that's being done, but structurally there's a lot that would need to be fixed at that hospital, and some of the homes affected in the area. It may have been worse if it wasn't Christmas Eve, because a lot of movement away from Gauteng province usually happens, but thankfully the casualty figures is lower than it could have been, because that's an industrial area and quite populated.
Yeah, and I was thinking, how many people inhaled that gas and how dangerous that was, for the area as well. That's what I also wanted to find out. And then for those buildings that have been, those infrastructure around the area that have been damaged, of course, have the owners...
Two homes.
Exactly, 2 homes. Has anything been said, about, the extent of damage that has happened there, or, how these people are going to be compensated for what has happened?
Well, a lot of ministers are saying a lot of things. That will happen in due course. I think for now, they're trying to secure lives. But the gas you're talking about is LPG. We inhale LPG more or less if we cook at home. The owners, insurance will have to be involved. I'm sure that will come in due course. But speaking about the workers that have been affected, we heard the Minister for Employment and Labor, Tulas Nesi, talking about supporting them through the compensation fund and the UIF, I'm not quite sure what UIF stands for. It's another fund to support workers who lose their livelihood, a means of livelihood. So those will be supported, and those homes affected, I'm sure they will be supported or compensated one way or another when the processes go on. But for now, I think it's the safety of people, the health, and those who have been affected, to just secure that they get the right medical attention at this point. That's what's topmost. But I believe that, and then you have the Economic Freedom Fighters, one of the opposition parties, who visited today, and they're talking about calling an emergency meeting of the Council of Ekurhuleni as soon as possible. They're in recess now and should have been resuming by the 26th of January. But they're calling for that so that they will work out things like what you just asked me about, how to help those or support those who have been affected in this incident.
And just to be clear, Betty, this is a bridge that, these tankers have plied on severally. So it wasn't unusual, for this particular tanker to be on the bridge at this time, given, the fact that he even plied the bridge and then this accident happened. There's supposed to be a process, depending on what your cargo is, the safety measures, alerting the fire service chief of the area you're passing through. I'm not quite sure he's familiar with that route. If he was, he would know the height limit for his truck. Remember, the truck, you have cars going over the bridge, but under the bridge is a tunnel-like passage. So that's where he got stuck, because his truck had reached the limit and wasn't. So if it's someone who is used to that route, I don't think he would have taken that particular bridge. So we'll get to hear his reasons by the 28th, when he's appearing at the Boksburg Magistrates Court, to know the reason why, or maybe he's not even South African. So we're not yet sure of a number of facts. But there's a call for by some of these politicians again saying, look, I think we need to take seriously carrying things like this via the rail route. Ensure that rail infrastructure or freight for things like this, which is a danger to the society if anything goes wrong. We need to take things like that seriously. But what has happened has happened. Hopefully lessons will be taken and notes as well taken on how to avoid things like this, because it could have been avoided. It could indeed have been avoided, but also a lesson, for many other African countries that, carry LPGs and other dangerous material via road. Yeah. Thank you again, Betty. Appreciate the reporting on this as well as the updates.
Thank you so much.
We'll have more coming up on Network Africa Plus. Zimbabwe's economy, the night markets cushioning crisis-weary citizens from inflation. We'll be giving you details shortly. Stay with us. Welcome back to Network Africa. We're still in South Africa, though, and it's still holiday season. Many so-called silly season when accidents shouldn't happen do happen, especially around bodies of water. And a study by the National Sea Rescue Institute showed that between 2016 and 2021, children below the age of 4 recorded the highest number of drowning, followed by men, who accounted for 81% of the drownings in the country. Experts say drownings happen a lot all over the world, especially during the festive season, and they blame the lack of swimming skills, the distraction, the drunkenness in some cases. This report takes a look at the issue of drowning, so what to do to prevent them and what to do when faced with the situation.
Each year, especially around the festive season, people visit beaches and attend pool parties. Often cases of near drownings and drownings are reported. Dr. Cleve Robertson from the National Sea Rescue Institute, NSRI, in South Africa, says it's important to understand the language of water.
People and adults often don't appreciate the depth of water. And as soon as they're out of their depth, they sink and they drown. People, when they go to the beach, need to be aware that these things exist and need to know how to identify them. So it's normally calm blue water in between the waves, and it looks calm, but in fact there's a current heading out to sea at a huge speed. So that calmish blue water that goes out between the waves, that's not a safe place to swim. So people need to be aware of that.
A study by the NSRI identified two groups, namely children below the age of 4 and young males, as the most vulnerable to drowning. In cases of children drowning, guardians or parents are usually distracted by gadgets, among others. In a 5-second selfie or game break, a lot can happen. Dr. Palesa Monyake, a pediatrician, paints a picture of how the situation is currently in pediatric wards.
This is our peak season. Unfortunately, this is when we see a rise in the incidence and prevalence of drowning. It is vital to teach parents about child safety in the home, but particularly water safety in this season, because that's when we see the most amount of drownings.
Another vulnerable group are young male adults. And that's related to testosterone in a way. We know that adult males take more risks, and in another sense, they probably drink more alcohol. And we know that alcohol and water don't mix in a water-related environment. There's far greater risk of drowning. If you've had a drink or several drinks, you're unable to think about what you're doing, and physically you're unable to save yourself. If you do fall into water and are not able to swim to survive.
Beaches and swimming pools are not the only spaces where drownings can occur. Both doctors share ways to prevent these incidents from happening and what to do when faced with such a situation.
The two most important measures that I would really recommend are, number one, for the adults themselves to learn how to swim. This includes their nannies and gardeners, by the way, in the home. And then also number two is CPR, learning how to do CPR. Your brain cannot do without oxygen for a long time. So you want to deliver oxygen to the lungs, and those are called rescue breaths. You'll often see people performing mouth to mouth. So those are rescue breaths. And then chest compressions, because these children, unfortunately, the longer they are immersed underwater, unfortunately, they go into cardiac arrest. So you really want to get the heart going. It's important that you have a fence around the swimming pool, obviously with a locked gate. That gate must be closed and locked if the swimming pool is not in use. And then also make sure that you've got a swimming pool cover.
Often people do not know how or what to do when a person is drowning or when a person has been rescued. Many carers or adults around do not know how to swim or what to do. Dr. Robertson says sometimes even emergency service members do not know either.
Yes, surprisingly, and you would think that they would do it naturally. That kind of took them a bit by surprise, but eventually they bought into it, and every one of our ambulance personnel had to learn to swim. And I think adults need to take that responsibility, because you're right, if your child falls into the pool, what are you going to do?
Parents have been encouraged to learn how to swim, and for children as young as 6 months to learn basic swimming or floating skills. The main message is, if you can't swim, don't. If you can, don't swim drunk. And for those around children, always be watchful. From Johannesburg, South Africa, Betty Dibia, Channels Television News.
An Ethiopian government delegation started on its way to the capital of Tigray this morning, but the first official visit by senior federal officials more than 2 years after the start of a conflict in the rebel region. A group of officials led by the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Tegase Chafo, is to oversee the implementation of the main points of the peace agreement signed on November 2nd with the Tigrayan rebel authorities. A government communications services said on a Facebook post this gesture is proof that the peace agreement is on the right track and progressing. A post sported a photo of the delegation composed of 20 people on an airport tarmac. It shows the Prime Minister's National Security Advisor, Redwan Hussein, the Ministers of Justice, Gideon Timotheos, Transports and Communications, Dag Moat Mogis, and Industry, Melaku Alabel, as well as the CEOs of Ethiopian Airlines and Ethio Telecom, Mesfin Teso and Frehiwot Tamiru. Government and rebel authorities signed an agreement in Pretoria on November 2nd to end a war that has ravaged northern Ethiopia for 2 years, killing tens of thousands of people and plunging the region into a deep humanitarian crisis. Well, we'll have more now from the DRC as the Congolese army describes the withdrawal of M23 rebels from a strategic town near the regional capital, Goma, as a decoy. The army says rebels were strengthening their positions in other areas. In recent months, the M23 rebels have conquered vast areas in eastern Congo, advancing within a few dozen kilometers of Goma. According to the DRC army, the rebels' intention is now to occupy the territory west of Goma. The army referred to clashes that broke out in Virunga National Park between the armed forces and the rebels over the weekend. Although street vending is outlawed in Zimbabwe as dust descends in Harare, the capital, traders can be seen still hawking a wide range of goods. A southern African country is battling an extended economic crisis marked by high inflation and unemployment, which is blamed on the government's violent seizure of Caucasian-owned farms, mismanagement, and, of course, corruption.
A steady stream of homebound workers flows from Harare's central business district into a sea of informal traders, selling everything from basic foodstuff and clothes to electronic devices. Many of Zimbabwe's urban poor battle to survive the economic crisis by selling various goods in informal pop-up street markets, where they are frequently raided and dispersed by police. As formal stores struggle to keep up with inflation, rentals, and other high business costs, informal traders often undercut their prices and eat into their market share. 27-year-old father of two, Byron Munangati, takes his place among hordes of vendors who invade Harare city center each night to evade the police. The night traders also target bargain-hunting commuters heading home from work.
They come here because our merchandise is cheaper. I expect better sales during Christmas holidays. People have a propensity to spend on groceries and other things.
Tino Tenda, a 21-year-old clothing vendor, says he makes more money selling at night than during the day.
In the afternoon, there are constant battles with police, so selling at night helps.
College student Obert Chinganyama has just struck a bargain for a pair of trainers. He says street vendors offer bargains he cannot get in formal stores.
I come to the streets because I can negotiate the price. These liquor dealers are willing to reduce the price always.
Although Zimbabwe is a long way off the 500 billion% hyperinflation reported by the International Monetary Fund in December 2008, the country still has the highest inflation in the world, measured at 255% in November. Even though the country has reintroduced its own currency after it was destroyed by hyperinflation, most of the street trade is in US dollars, which the country adopted in 2009.
Well, that's where we end Network Africa today. We hope it doesn't spoil any of your celebrations. Thanks for watching. I'm Amarachi Ubani.